Welcome to the CHIME Opioid Action Center podcast, where healthcare leaders explore how technology is making an impact in the fight to end the opioid crisis. Here's today's moderator.
Welcome and thank you for joining us for this episode of the CHIME Opioid Action Center podcast. I'm Art Nicholas. I'm a member of the CHIME Opioid Task Force and the Chief Commercial Officer of Interlace Health. And I'm going to be your moderator today. Today's guest is David Reeser, who is a serial entrepreneur, inventor, and mentor to startup founders. David is also the founder and CEO of OpiAID, a data science company making the treatment of substance use disorder safer and more effective. We're going to be speaking today on the process of innovation and funding for healthcare IT, addressing the opioid crisis and how his technology solution is addressing the problem. David, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Art, it's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me. Really excited to be able to speak with you today.
Again, we really appreciate you being here. And before we dig into the main topic at hand, can you give us a little more background on yourself and how you got to this point in involvement in founding OpiAID?
Absolutely. So I am a serial entrepreneur. Prior to OpiAID, I had started a consulting company focused on working with radiology practices and helping them become more profitable. And then I started an IT company back in 2018 that I sold during COVID. And that company focused on infrastructure as a service for attorneys, first of all, desktop for attorneys and local governments. Sold that during COVID and used the proceeds of that to go full throttle into OpiAID. And I'm really excited to be here today. A little bit more about my background and how we arrived here is, yes, I am a serial entrepreneur, but I'm also someone who has experienced substance use disorder in their family. So this hits near and dear to home. My father passed away when I was 16, and shortly thereafter, my mother started drinking, and so I lost about 20 years of relationship with my mother, and that definitely left a lasting impression on me. I decided to go into healthcare, and I spent 13 years in patient care. So I've seen quite a bit of substance use and the effects it can have on someone's life. But something really important happened to me in 2018. And I literally got a download from God saying, I want you to love your neighbor. And what that came down to was I started seeing people with infinite inherent worth. The why behind OpiAID is a love for our neighbors. And out of love, I wanted to do something about those that were struggling with opioid use disorder in our community, where 11.6% of our working population are misusing or abusing opioids. So it was out of a desire to want to see our community healed that this technology company was founded. And here we are today, talking with you and sharing not only our message, but how we arrived here so that more can benefit from applications of technology in the way that we're doing it.
Wow, that's an incredible story, and we really appreciate you sharing that. It's clear that you've got strong motivation to make this successful. Turning to the main area of our focus today, can you share with us how SBIR funding has helped you grow your organization and contributed to the work you're looking to do?
SBIR was incredibly crucial. So first of all, for those of you that aren't familiar with SBIR, it stands for Small Business Innovation Research Grant. It's an application that you can apply for this grant that's funded by the federal government. We specifically wrote grants to the National Institute of Drug Abuse. The benefit of SBIR grants to OpiAID was first validation. So it's not even about the money. It's about the validation. Winning an SBIR grant means that you are a company that is or the application of the technology that you're looking to develop is impactful, that it's innovative, and it deserves to be funded. And what an SBIR grant does is it increases the profile of your business and gives you non-dilutive funding to be able to develop a technology. Powerful. Our first SBIR grant, we won a phase 1 for $276,000, and with that SBIR grant, we were able to develop an algorithm and validate it that's capable of quantifying and identifying levels of withdrawal and identifying acute use of opioids. I mean, that's a pretty big lift on 276,000. So we got the
Sure
validation,
is.
but we also discovered some breakthroughs that we presented around the world already. So SBIR was crucial for us. Much needed money, non-dilutive funding to develop technology that, frankly, no investor wants to invest in research unless you already have a small or a strong commercial footprint. So we were a fledgling startup, and SBIR went a long way for us.
That certainly is an impactful investment. Broadening the conversation out a little bit, can you share, based on your experience, how does private and public sources of funding fit into contributing and furthering this type of innovation?
Absolutely. So I truly believe that even with, a strong raise, angel or venture capital, that applying for SBIR dollars is still very important. Very important. I have other friends who are founders who've raised $25 million through SBIR and went and raised 100 million, through venture capital. There's definitely a place for it because R&D, most VCs don't want to invest in that, and frankly, there's no point there's no points in diluting your company with venture capital if the government will give it to you for nothing, except for writing a successful grant. The other extreme benefit of the SBIR is that you get to understand where research is going, because where funding going is often where regulatory environment is going, and it's often where science is going. So by writing the SBIRs and winning them, you know that you're setting the pace of where the future of that type of care is going. And the best way to predict the future is to create it. So that is a lot of what that R&D is. And but that's not to discount what you do with venture capital either, because the limitation of SBIR is that you can't use it for legal purposes. Well, guess what? You want to protect what you've built. So if you plan on filing IP and creating contractual work with the technology you have, SBIR is not going to pay for that. So you will either need to generate revenue on your own or get some early venture capital to be able to generate that revenue and protect what you've built. There's a place for both of it. It's just like anything, there has to be a balance between SBIR or any grant mechanism and dilutive funding.
You just raised a couple of great points, David, that I wanted to kind of drill in on a little bit more. First question I had is there a limitation in the amount of funding you can get from an SBIR? I know you mentioned that you can't use it for legal purposes, but is there like it's a minimum of 100,000 and a cap of 10 million, or are there other restrictions or boundaries?
Yeah, so with SBIR as the mechanism, normally you have a phase 1, phase 2, or a fast track. So those are sort of the three criteria. Phase 1s are normally around $150,000. It's basically proof of concept. They're giving you around 150 grand. We've got a lot more for numerous reasons, but usually get around 150,000. And it's just to create something that's minimally viable. You're testing a theory. Often phase 1s fail. And that's okay, because you miss every shot you don't take. If you happen to have great results from your phase 1, you have the opportunity to apply for a phase 2. A phase 2 can be up to 2.5 million. Is usually capped at 2.5 million. And that's to take the technology to the next level and then to commercialization. By the end of phase 2, you should have a product that you can commercialize. And then there's this other mechanism called a fast track, which is a phase 1 and phase 2 combined. And those can be pretty large grants. I don't know exactly what the ceiling is on them, but we won one, so I can at least speak to the one that we won. Our fast track was 2.8 million. And it's extremely hard to win a fast track. I believe, I could be mistaken on this, so somebody call me out if I'm wrong, but I believe only 5 were issued by NIDA last year. We were one of the 5. So we won 2.8 million. And it basically says, you guys have enough evidence that we can do phase 1 and phase 2 combined. So you essentially are this amount of money is being put aside for you. You still have milestones in phase 1, but as long as you meet them, phase 2 money is there, and they expect it to be commercialized. But I'm commercializing much of what we've already developed. So there's a balance.
You mentioned NIDA. Is that the primary source of SBIR funding for this type of work?
No, actually, it's not. You can apply for, see, that's one of the great mysteries, is that people think, oh, if I'm working in substance use disorder, I can only apply to National Institute of Drug Abuse. That's not actually the case. That's why it's really important to look at what these different agencies are interested in, because what you might realize is that you should do an SBIR phase 1 through the Air Force, because they might have something that they're actually really interested in your healthcare application, even if it is sort of substance use or behavioral health related. And then NSF, National Science Foundation, often will be very interested in components of your technology for different reasons. So it's important to look at these different agencies and what they're interested in funding. For OpiAID, we've stuck to the NIDIF track because it's what made the most sense for us, and we've been successful in getting funding. But just to be clear, we've not gotten all of our grants either. The first application we wrote, we were denied. Thank God we were, because if we would have got that first one funded, we'd have to be out of business already. We would, like, we had to go back to the drawing board. Thank God they denied us. And in going back to the drawing board, we found out what the market actually wanted. Yeah.
You also mentioned a couple minutes ago, not just SBIR, but any other kind of grant money, either with OpiAID or in your mentoring or your prior life. Have you gotten other types of grants that could contribute or help someone, get off the ground and be successful in the healthcare space?
Absolutely. There's so much money out there, and you have to. So I have actually quite a bit of advice here, but I'll try to keep it short. So in the state of North Carolina, we have a number of different grants and funding mechanisms. OpiAID's been super beneficial. It's been super beneficial for us being in the state of North Carolina. So we won an NCIDEA grant, a seed grant for $50,000, which not only helped us to be able to further the mission of what we're doing, but it also helped us get better at the business side of the house with OpiAID. And there's another group too called NC Biotechnology Center, and we won a Bioneer competition, or at least second place in a Bioneer competition, which gave us a ton of business advisory expertise, as well as $10,000 prize. And these are all grants that you can apply for as a small business. We have a number of them in North Carolina. We also want a loan from NC Biotechnology Center, super low interest loan, but they do it in a way to lift up the business. And I mean, we've won a bunch of awards. So what I would recommend is for any of those groups that are out there that are wondering, hey, how do I get off the ground if I can't win an SBIR? Because I promise you, it's going to take you 100 hours to write the grant, and it's going to be a year before you see your first penny. So if you need money faster than that and you're not ready to raise angel or venture capital, some grants are the way to go, because in less than 6 months, you could have money in the door and some validation. And the power of it is that each one of these little grants that you win, even if it's $5,000 or $10,000, it creates momentum. And momentum is super important as a startup. Any momentum, because it builds on itself just like a wave. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's terrific. That's fantastic advice. Gonna move off the funding question for a minute and really talk about what are the kinds of support and partnerships beyond the funding partners that are necessary for an organization like yours, an effort like yours to succeed?
That's a great question. So like anything, it all comes down to team. You have to have a rock solid team. If you don't have one, you got to start building one. And the way to go about doing it is to do a lean canvas. Are you familiar with lean canvas, Art?
No.
So a lean canvas is a lean canvas exercise. Stephen Blank's lean startup methodology. You have to do a lean canvas, and basically what it is it's a one sheet or one board document, like one visual. In the middle is your unique selling proposition. To the right is everything that creates revenue, and everything left is that are the resources needed to be put in to create that revenue and that opportunity. So down the middle, this is what makes us unique and why we should be in business. To the right, this is what we're going to gain. To the left, this is what the inputs that have to happen. I highly recommend doing that exercise, because in doing that, you'll identify what partnerships you need to be successful. One of the things we determined at OpiAID is that we were never going to be a hardware company. We're never going to be a hardware company. We're a data science company. We write the algorithms that live on hardware, that plug into software. We are a data science company. We built the largest data set in the world, to my knowledge anyway, and I've done some looking around. The largest data set in the world on the biometrics around SUD. We have about 7 billion rows of sensor data. So pretty sizable data set. We knew we were a data science company. We knew what we were focused on. I needed partnerships on the hardware side. I needed partnerships on the software side. We were never going to do that, and distribution. So knowing us as a business and what our identity is and what's actually truly unique, we made sure we built a team that could support that unique selling proposition. And then we built partnerships ensure that we wouldn't have to be, the machine that toasted the bread, buttered the bread, and then served it to people. We're focused on what makes us uniquely us. And with focus comes results. If you lack focus in business, no matter how much money you raise, you're going to fail.
How did you figure out who were the right partners, given this was a relatively new area? I mean, I know you mentioned you certainly had a background in healthcare prior to this, but were there certain approaches that allowed you to identify who were going to be the right people? You identified what kind of partners you needed. How did you then distill down, or what criteria did you use to choose the ones that you've chosen?
Keeping it super simple. The first question I ask at OpiAID is, will this help my neighbor? Simple as that. I do that with our team internally, and operationally, I do it with the way that our solution applies to the world, and I do it with our partnerships. Will this help my neighbor? And when I say neighbor, I mean, will this help my neighbor in recovery? Nobody's an addict. I see people with infinite inherent worth. Who's going to value my neighbor the way I do? So if I talk to a group that I think is a great fit, operationally, technically, their product or service is the best of the best, but the way that they talk and the way that they operate isn't in the spirit in which we do business, is an instant no. And I don't care if everything else makes sense. You can't make a good deal with a bad person. Criteria number 2 is, I want solid relationships that last. So will this be a win-win for both parties? Point number 3 is, operationally, does it make sense? Do they really fit our need? And then it's a combination of handshake and piece of paper. And what I mean by that is, can we build a strong relationship with them that is going to last, and they're good quality people that want to do business? And then, can we get the piece of paper, the legal document to support it? And then often it comes down to that early test. A lot of things can be right. Show me with your actions. I measure people's say-do ratio. Say-do. Some companies say something, let's see it, right?
No, that's great advice. And you shared quite a number of really great points. And it does seem like a cliche to say that it needs to be win-win, but I've seen it throughout my career, the lack of understanding the win for both sides, and as you said, to make sure it's balanced, has really oftentimes set organizations up for failure. Either their expectations are out of whack in terms of what the partner can deliver, or their view of the value they're going to bring to the partner is completely out of whack. So appreciate you taking us through that.
You have to start off trying to set those appropriate expectations and test it. That's it. That's all I'm saying.
Perfect. Now, can you tell us a little bit more specifically about the technology solution that you've created as it relates to addressing the opioid crisis that we face?
Sure. So one of the things that we did that helped OpiAID be successful is that after or during our execution of our phase 1 research, we applied to NIH I-Corps program. Not sure if you're familiar with that, but the I-Corps program is an accelerator program offered by the National Institute of Health. If you are an SBIR phase 1 winner and you apply, you have a 10% chance of getting in. So it's not an easy program to get into, but it's kind of like volunteering to go to boot camp. It's hard, right? So over the course of 8 weeks, you do 100 customer discovery interviews, and you pitch every single day, and you read a lot of material. But what it is it's a super accelerated, super challenging business acceleration camp, incubator accelerator. So during that process, you find out what people actually want. So you know that you're solving a real problem. So this is what we heard. In doing 120 interviews, the strongest theme that came up, that rose to the surface, was clinicians told us we need timely and actionable data. We need timely and actionable data to help support clinical decision-making, because we've got too many people failing their MOUD treatment. Yeah. When national retention MOUD, or medically assisted treatment, however you want to refer to it, when national retention at 6 months is 1 out of 3 individuals, between 31 and 34%, and that's one of your key indicators of seeing, potentially much better clinical outcomes, we got a problem if that's the gold standard. And what they told us is, we believe that it's because we lack timely and actionable data. So that's what OpiAID brings. And we do it in 2 fashions. First, we make best use of the data the clinicians already have access to. So pulling data out of their electronic health records around urine toxicology, assessments that look at depression, anxiety, PTSD, looking at their appointment cadence, looking at other variables, if they're being treated for behavioral health reasons. These are important metrics to take into consideration. So we take that data and we apply machine learning to it. we display it in the decision support dashboard within their electronic health record system. And that can help them better understand how patients, how our neighbors are doing in their care, and whether or not they're resilient or they're prone to relapse soon. And what we've done that adds a tremendous amount of value to that, because to be honest, for those of you that are listening who are CIOs of hospitals and are already doing dashboards and can already do this data, God bless you. You know, it's important work and needs to happen, particularly in these smaller clinics in rural regions. What OpiAID has done that's incredibly unique is that we leverage common wrist-worn devices like the Samsung watch, you know, one of our suppliers of hardware, and we've developed an algorithm of all these federal dollars that we won. And what it does is it personalizes the approach to treatment. We collect data every 5 minutes, and we apply machine learning to it, and we combine it with those data sets that are coming from electronic health records. So we have a 360-degree picture of what's going on with that individual. You know, so we've got markers that we're taking through, biomarkers we're taking through FDA right now, showing that we can accurately quantify levels of withdrawal and when it's happening, and when those are using opioids are using them. And the purpose of that is to help guide, at least in the early days, decision making around the induction phase of MOUD. And then on the tail end, how do we taper these individuals and get them off the opioids if they don't need them safely, to do it safely, you know, and while doing all that, monitoring their sleep, how actigraphy and depression and how all these data points come together. That's our niche. We are a data science company. So providing timely and actionable data when clinicians need it. So more of our neighbors see better clinical outcomes. The clinics have increased revenue, and the costs to the payers are significantly less. When people stay in treatment, they get better. It's like showing up at the gym. You stop showing up at the gym, you're not going to see results. So that's what we help with.
Thanks for sharing that. And that's powerful capabilities. You know, you started to say that you started to cover this towards the end of our last conversation. The impact. So you mentioned you're lowering costs to payers, you're improving revenue for clinics, and I think most importantly, in terms of the actual care for the patient, it's getting better. Do you have metrics that you're using for each one of those? And can you share a little bit about, you know, how you're tracking that and what kind of results you've seen so far?
Yeah, I can speak to this. So, you know, we're looking at retention at 30 days, 90 days, and 180 days. So that's part of what we're looking at. We're looking at how depression, anxiety changes over time. We're looking at a number of different factors, including social determinants of health. Because we can touch so much data, you know, there's a lot of ways to be able to reproduce this data. And the reason it's really important is because each of these decision makers has different criteria. So for the payers, they want to see that you're reducing our costs, and there are certain social determinant health markers based on who they represent within their market that we need to show impact there. You know, for our clinicians, we need to help them understand that patients are getting stabilized faster, because when you're delivering these type of insights and they can make decisions faster, where did we see a decision was made differently based on our data? And what outcome did that lead to? A timely intervention? Did that prevent a relapse? You know, how do you measure that? And the sort of the tricky part of this is that some of these clinics, they measure, actually something I'd love to hear from your viewers, particularly those who are working within substance use disorders, how do you define a relapse? How do you define retention? Because what I've found is that in these different markets, it's defined differently. So part of our work is even creating a standard for this, you know, where we can show from a data science perspective, when you define it this way, this is the result you get. So we're trying to create a more refined understanding how we even look at outcomes. At the end of the day, we want to see people retain in treatment. We want to see people be free from substance dependence and see other health markers that we know everybody can agree upon, including social determinants of health. From a results standpoint, I know we've got a 92% retention rate for clients that use our technology. That's pretty extraordinary. I also know that people are satisfied with the technology and that they're excited to be a part of what we're doing, because part of the messaging of OpiAID is why people resonate with it and actually engage with the technology. We tell our neighbors and those that are putting these watches on, we tell them, look, this is what we found out through doing discovery and doing focus groups is a lot of times people don't feel worthy to get better. Isn't that something? Like, they don't feel worthy of getting the latest and greatest because they don't believe they deserve it. But guess what? They believe that the people that want them there deserve them to get better. They want to be a part of making treatment safer and more effective for their friends, for their neighbors, and they'll engage for that reason. which is really beautiful. It's amazing because I really believe that the gifts and the things that we were given weren't meant for us anyway. And you find that to be even more true when you're in these environments where they've got everything stacked against them, homeless, in the throes of substance use, where there's very little for them to look forward to, but they want this for somebody else. They're willing to engage and stay committed. And now you see their life come back together again until the self-worth hits again. And they're like, wait a minute, I am worth it. And then you see them step into it and lean to it even more. So it's really a beautiful thing. Hopefully I answered your question.
You did. And I think, one of the things that I've taken away from our conversation is, as powerful as technology can be to assist in this, the level of humanity that coincides with the work you're doing, I think is equally important.
If you don't mind, not only do I agree, this is how I feel about this, is that technology is just a tool. It makes things better, faster, and cheaper. It's how you use a tool that makes it important, right? So how do you apply technology? Apply it in a meaningful way to improve humanity. At OpiAID, we're going to make decisions putting our neighbors before profit every time. Every time. Every time. If you're an investor and you're listening to this, just know that OpiAID will do the right thing for the neighbor every time. The other thing I'm really confident about as a serial entrepreneur is that if you solve a problem, especially if you put people first, the profits always follow. And we're making money at OpiAID, believe you me. The reality is, if we don't in healthcare start putting people first, truly putting them first, and people only vote with their time and their wallet, right? So if you're out there, you need to vote with your time and your wallet and put people first. If you do that and you really solve a problem, you're going to have a successful company. But that's what we're doing. Always the why. It's always the why first. Anybody can develop technology, but when it's held in the hands of people that truly care and know how to wield that weapon, or you can do some massive good.
What is next? Are you thinking about expanding beyond tracking, or maybe you already do, beyond 180 days, or are there other ways in which you want to see your technology, your data, your analysis be used beyond what you're doing today?
Yes, sir. Great question, Art. So this is where OpiAID's going for those of you that are listening. And I believe that this is a lot of this translates to a lot of other technologies. So this isn't the OpiAID show. I feel like this is very much folks who are thinking about innovation within healthcare, but particularly substance use disorder. This is where I see the world going. So this is what's happening. First, we're starting with opioid use disorder. We're looking at the induction phase of MAT. We're going to look at titrating people off of opioids too, and how to make it safer all along the continuum. I believe that OpiAID technology will likely be hidden in the background. It'll be devices powered by OpiAID, and will be a part of people's long-term recovery. And it's going to help them better understand how their bodies are adjusting, so that you don't hear that story that after someone's been clean for 5 years, the next day you read about him in the newspaper and you say, how did this happen? This husband, father of 2, his whole life was put together and everything looked great and he overdosed. Like, we're going to be able to see the tremors that lead to the earthquake and be able to alert the appropriate individuals, so we don't have to read headlines like that anymore. So that's starting with the end in mind. Between now and then, we're going to be applying and creating more technology around stimulant use disorder, alcohol use disorder. We're really tackling addiction, which in my opinion, and this is not Webster's definition of addiction, but I believe addiction is anytime we have a unhealthy relationship with a person, place, object, or thing. Anything that has an unhealthy pull on our life that we can't put down and is negatively impacting other parts of our life, I look at that as addiction. That's my thing. So we're looking to combat addiction in multiple forms, starting with opioids, stimulants, alcohol, and we'll see where it goes from there. And I want OpiAID to be the premier data source for all those metrics, because while today we're focused on making treatment safer and more effective, in the future, we're going to broaden it, because the data that we're collecting is so rare and so beautiful that it will likely inform how therapeutics are developed, new devices that come out in the future that look at substance use in a different way, because the data is really rich. And I really want to find more ways to share that data and not be selfish. Like, I want to be a part of helping make things better for my neighbor, even if financially it's not the greatest thing for OpiAID. If it'll help and advance this mission, that's where we're going.
That's Fantastic, and admirable. I know you've done this throughout our conversation today, but I keep going back to the fact that you mentor other individuals that are founders and probably working in this space, or certainly in healthcare. If you were going to sum up in a couple of sentences, what should someone who's looking to take the plunge and be an entrepreneur for the first time in healthcare IT, particularly if they were going to enter into dealing with substance abuse disorders, what would your advice be beyond what we've talked about so far, or maybe summarizing it?
Yeah. So first of all, I always believe in starting with the why. Why are you doing it? Like, your why's got to be pretty big, and you have to be committed to it, because the one thing about startup and becoming entrepreneurs is always going to be harder than you think. And you got to be prepared to be completely broke for 18 months. So you either have to be working at, your career and building this on the side, or you have to have a little bit of extra money put aside, because you're going to be broke for 18 months. It's going to be a lot harder than you're expecting it to be. But if your why is big enough and your vision is clear enough about where you're going, then it's likely a good idea. And you've got to have a ton of resilience. You have to make sure that you're investing in the people that invest in you, i.e., if you're married, you better set aside time for your wife or your husband, your kids, and make sure that you turn that clock off and be able to spend quality time with them, because it was it worth to, gain the world and lose the things that are most valuable. If I was sitting at the end of this rainbow with $1 billion in my pocket and no one liked me, it wouldn't be worth it. I don't work for money. So I've got great relationships. Maintain your relationships as you go. But start off with a clear why. Do a lean canvas. Figure out, why am I the guy and who do I need around me? Or I'm the girl and who do I need around me to be able to be successful in this? And then, tap into your local, this is huge. Tap into your local entrepreneurial ecosystem. Start attending events. Find out, what does it take to be able to build a startup? Apply for grants, win some grants, lose some grants. You learn just as much when you lose as you win. And I've been there. I've lost plenty. But win and lose some grants, learn some things along the way, learn how to pitch, learn how to be confident in your own skin. But the biggest advice I can give is simply this, and this is really simple. You have to be perseverant, positive.
Thank you for your time and insights today, David. And thank you all for listening to the CHIME Opioid Action Center podcast. Please visit opioidactioncenter.com for this and other episodes. Take care and be safe.